here at Ball Mountain, they're hydraulic gates. So you go down and basically you turn on the pumps that run the hydraulic oil down through the pistons that will pick up the gate and close the gate. And then there's just buttons and dials that you'll hold the button and watch the dial to coordinate if you wanted to go a half a foot or 2/10 of a foot or whatever gate change you may be making. So you'd do that, and then you'd probably wait a half hour or an hour before you made another gate change, so that you're not sending a big gush of water all of a sudden downstream. We work closely with Reservoir Control Center, and what they do is they look at all the rivers. So if we get an event where you pick up an inch or 2 inches of water, the rivers come up, we will talk with them about how much we will discharge, about how much CFS at each project. And then we'll keep constantly in tune with them and give them reports, and they will be watching, and slowly we'll open up. So it's all coordinated through RCC. It isn't like us just running by the seat of our pants. It's really a constructive effort through all of New England.
As huge as these dams are, their size pales in comparison to the dam not built, an ill-advised plan thwarted only through the stubborn fortitude of some bold area residents.
Our theme at the expo for 2006 was No Damn Way, and it was the history of the Freeman Inc. And this was a group of just everyday citizens in the West River Valley who found out about the government's proposal for a dam site that was going to be built down in Dummerston area, West Dummerston. When the dam would have been built, the waters would have backed up, and all of West Dummerston would have been 300 feet underwater. The waters would have backed up onto Rock River, which takes you over to Williamsville, and that would have been totally submerged. Going north on the West River, you come to Brookline. A majority of that would have been underwater.
Newfane would have been underwater except for the courthouse, the Newfane Inn, and the Grange Hall, they called it at the time. And those three buildings would have been on an island.
As you follow up north on Route 30, Harmonyville would have been totally underwater, and parts of Townsend. And then you get to West Townsend, that would have been under. And the proposed site was the waters would have gone up to where the dam is now in Bald Mountain.
Well, when this started out, it was basically a group of people who were concerned about their homes,
Yes.
their villages, their public buildings, their cemeteries, and it grew to be a national issue because of states' rights. Basically, they were saying that whatever the Corps of Engineers recommended was, the government could do this, so they could come in, any state in the Union. The federal government would come in and they would pay for the dam. The state of Vermont had to buy the land. I think that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
They had to buy the land. They had to build the new roads. The only expense that was for the federal government was building the dam. The state of Vermont had to pay all the rest of the expenses, buying the properties. Plus, they were losing a huge tax base. They said that what really started it was when the engineers came and they felt that they kind of snuck into the area and just started surveying. And so then when they started looking into it, then people started being concerned.
During the day, these engineers are out there in all types of inclement weather, and they're putting their little surveyor flags down. Well, as soon as the engineers went to their hotel, whatever they stayed in Brattleboro, the locals would go out and pull up all the engineers' stakes. So they come out the next morning and all their work was just, they had to start all over. This started out in the late 1930s, about 37, 38. And all the headlines at that time were basically about, Hitler and the problems in Europe. And it always seemed like the headlines for this problem with the West River fighting the government's proposal was always like second, third page, and not many people knew much about it. And at this point, Governor Wills, Vermont Governor Wills, realized that we were in deep trouble. and he started backing. And a lot of the local people from different areas, Rutland, Arlington, Norman Rockwell, even got in on the bandwagon. The newspaper clippings started surfacing in 1937, and that's when they decided to use the Freeman ink. And it had nothing to do, a lot of people thought it had to do with the Masonic, group, but it didn't. They just wanted to be free men without the government telling them what to do with their own homeland.
When Governor Wills got into this, he realized the seriousness of it, and he told the group to get their guns ready, but don't shoot until I tell you. And this was in the paper, and so I guess the Freemen just took this and ran with it, and it was a good publicity shot. So they got their guns and they stood in front of the church, which was actually going to be underwater if the dam had come into fruition, and had their picture taken.
This newspaper clipping, the photo of the Freemen in front of the church in West Dummerston, it went nationwide. It hit all the newspapers, and it spurred other little towns to try to fight against the government doing similar things in their area. They were persistent. They kept going back to Washington, and they had Senator Aiken and Senator Austin of Vermont on their side. And when it got to the House of Senate, that's when the subcommittees really analyzed this. And I think it was becoming apparent that it was 1944. The war was in its prime. They had other things to worry about. This opposition was drawing such attention. They decided that instead of having this flood control, they were going to do it on a smaller level, farther upstream. And then that's when, in August of '44, is when they scrapped it. It was started in 1937 when they proposed it, and it wasn't over until August of 1944. And for a group of a small band of citizens to keep, stay together that long, these guys were just everyday walks of life. One was an elementary school principal. There was an undertaker there. There were cabinet workers, shoe salesman, cabinet worker,
physician.
Yeah, a physician. There
journalist.
A judge, Judge Shea, was on the board. So they're all walks of life who gathered together, to make this standoff happen.
That such a small group could start something like this, and actually fight the federal government and win.
And actually,
it was just, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As unpopular as the proposed Dummerston Dam was to the Freemen, existing ones also meet with impassioned opposition.
I wish I had been in place when these dams were going under construction, because quite honestly, these dams are in place in order to control flood waters coming from the upper valley to protect bad development decisions in the lower valley, in the Springfield, Hartford areas of the lower valley, to trap the water up here. Well, we gave up part of our rivers in order to protect their infrastructure. I, for one, think they should be paying something back to the river, that we should have assistance in making the parts of the river that are not dammed better. All dams have a negative impact on the ecosystem of a riverine system. First off, they fracture it, and by that I mean that they create barriers so that you do not get the up and downstream motion of aquatic species, both macroinvertebrates as well as fish. That fracturing is one of the things people are concerned about when there isn't sufficient mixing of the gene pool, that there's an isolation between points in the river, upriver versus downriver. The major concern is that because the water slows down as it comes to the dam into the reservoir area, and because there's no shade, water temperature goes up. Consequently, the dissolved oxygen levels decline. It's part of the physics of water. In dams this size that have a large reservoir area, in fact, there's siltation on the bottom. Fish and all other aquatic macroinvertebrate life require open cobble grainy bottoms at one point or another in their life cycle. And with the siltation that comes in behind a dam and stops there, that cobble formation at the bottom is lost. Lastly, large dams like this, if they're not operated properly, stop the river from taking the sinuous form and the pool-riffle ratio that the aquatic life in a river requires. Different species require different parts of the river. Some require deep water pools, slow moving. Some require that fast water, white water at the riffles flow. And if you stop a river from doing that, then the ratio gets off and the habitat's not available to the species. All of the anadromous species need to have open access upriver. By that I mean salmon, and in this watershed, the sea lamprey. Both dams should be retrofitted to allow not only returning anadromous fish, but resident species to be able to move up and down the river. Even our trout and smallmouth bass, for that matter, are moving upriver in order to find good spawning areas with the right flows and the right depth of water. And that would cost some money. I think people in the valley should advocate that that money should be spent.
Still, others see the dams as positive opportunities. For years, the National Canoe Slalom Championships were held annually in Jamaica State Park. Though competitive racing no longer exists here, paddlers from around the Northeast travel here in the spring and fall to take advantage of 2 scheduled dam releases.
Last time we went down, we just put in below the dumplings because it looked kind of rugged for us. But this time we went up above it and rode through it, and everyone made it through. And this is one of the burliest rides we've done.
Sure. We've been working on a lot mellower rivers than this one. This is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We'll be back again.
Well, this is the last hurrah for the season. People know it, so they're going to get their boats wet for the last time. People are looking for used boats to try to make some deals at the end of the season. But it's, like I said, the last hurrah, so there's some good spirit, good energy.
While Massachusetts-based rafting companies time their half-day trips to the Corps' planned whitewater, a Newfane organization sees much deeper potential in the river's rapids.
The river is an opportunity to teach children much more beyond the paddling skills. The parallel being drawn here with the river to the river of life, and to the paddling skills, to the skills, the observation skills that help people live their life in the flow with the rest of the world and not against such flow. The river, the power of the river teaches you that you can't fight it. You have to work with it. Oftentimes we observe the animals, we observe the ducks, we observe the fish and see what do they do. The ducks are best whitewater paddlers around here. You watch them go, even little ones, how they can go up the river, how they catch eddies, how they ferry. So that observation skills, kids develop an understanding of the flow, and then they work with the river. While on the river, besides paddling, there's a lot to learn about the water, about the people, about our past. Starting back with how it was on the river before the Europeans, what the river was like before the dams, what the river will be like in the future, and what we need to do, what is our responsibility to the river, and how this waterway is connected to all of the water cycle on the earth. So this very small, insignificant sport leads to really, for those who want to dig in to the understanding of life. It's great to connect people with their local river, and also taking local kids, such as Leland Gray High School students, taking them down the river. They see their hometown from a very different vantage point and say, oh, here's my grandparents' house. For local people to see the value of its place, not only other people say, oh, you live in a beautiful place, and they say, oh, we live in a boring place. Well, this is one thing that local kids can do, and that will be very fulfilling. So it's an opportunity that's right here, and it doesn't need to cost a lot of money.